After we settled into post-NICU life and the long winter ended, we started going out into the world to socialize with other babies and parents, just like the experts advise. As a first time mom without grandparents or family nearby, which is the case for so many parents nowadays, I leaned heavily on advice from medical and early development professionals. And as a preemie parent coming out of the NICU, we had even more sources than most, like hospital follow ups, physiotherapy, post discharge nurses, plus everything the algorithm was pushing at me online. There is so much noise out there under the name of expert advice, but some of it contradicts itself. And most of it is generalized with very little understanding of your specific baby and your specific situation. And I wanted so badly to do my best for my son that I followed a lot of it without questioning it enough. Looking back, I think I made some mistakes. Hi, this is Never Too Early. Today, I want to be honest about the mistakes I made so maybe you don't have to repeat them. The advice I heard most consistently from pretty much every professional we saw was this: your child needs to socialize with peers every day. I took that seriously. I structured our entire life around it. So here is what we actually did from around 8 or 9 months after coming home, which was also my son's corrected age at the time. We joined three baby groups, one weekly English speaking group, one private group I found on the playground and essentially invited ourselves into, and one at a local family center. On top of that, we were at the library 1 or 2 times a week, baby swimming once a week, playground multiple times a day during summer, at least once a day through winter. We got annual zoo memberships. We made frequent trips to other neighborhoods and other cities. And I was still building and setting up our home during this whole period too, because we only moved into this apartment a few months before I got pregnant. So there were so many things to be done. So there were constant trips to IKEA, home improvement stores, as well as many other shops and supermarkets. All of it with the baby every single day. I was walking 6 to 8 hours easily. On slow days, maybe 3 to 4 hours. I know that sounds impossible to people who live somewhere car dependent, but I live in a very walkable, family friendly city, so that was how it was. And I remember one winter day pushing the stroller down the road in the cold, thinking, would anyone actually believe how much a mom tries? I was dragging my baby around to all of these places multiple times a day, believing I was doing the right thing for his socialization. I was basically treating his prematurity as if it simply hadn't happened, as if he was just like any full term baby and just needed the exposure. But as I shared in the previous episode, he had a very different developmental path. Cognitively, he is very ahead, but physically, he has a major mobility delay. He only learned to sit up by himself at 20-month corrected age, and he started taking independent steps around 2 years of corrected age. And without reliable control over his own body, being around other babies whose behavior is naturally unpredictable and physical made him extremely uncomfortable. So he did not enjoy any of these. Not the baby group, not the swimming course, not the constant going around to places. In the groups, he would just sit very still and reserved, just observing. He never smiled. The playgrounds were interesting when it was quiet, but it became very stressful when there were many kids around. In the swimming class, he cried through the first 3 sessions completely. When we showed up for the fourth one and he finally adjusted, the other parents and teachers were really impressed and cheerful about how he still showed up. And he kind of learned to tolerate the swimming class and kept the same very serious face without much smile. And the library was a bit better because it was usually calmer, so he did it okay there. What I didn't fully acknowledge at the time was this. After being born in 23 weeks, my son had spent the first 4 months of his life being poked, injected, examined, and treated against his will under bright lights with constant noise when he was supposed to be quietly growing in the dark womb. Of course, he had high anxiety, and for that, of course, he needed calm, structured, and predictable environments. But I was dragging him into the opposite of that every single day because that's what the advice said so. And here's the part that still makes me a bit frustrated looking back. Even after I had described everything we were already doing to some of those medical professionals we saw post NICU, they often still responded with, "Your child should be socializing with peers every day." It felt like the goalpost kept moving and none of what I was trying was ever enough. I kept going to all these places because I was genuinely worried about my son falling behind. That fear was real. But looking back honestly, I think there was something else going on too. I think I was trying so hard, partly because I wanted someone to say, "Wow, you're doing so much, that's more than enough, and you're doing great." And guess what? Nobody said that to me ever. Maybe it's just my mom on a phone call from Korea, but no one recognized or cheered. And I eventually realized nobody was going to because they simply have no idea. The only person who could say that to me was myself because I was the only one who could really see everything I was doing and how much heart and energy go into this. Here's what I've learned about how professional advice actually works in reality. Most professionals simply do not have time to understand the full picture of your family, like your baby's specific history, their temperament, and how you are structuring your days and environment around them. They have a short time window with you, and in that window, they offer their best generalized advice. That's just the reality of the system. And it might actually save some babies from being very isolated or neglected. Anyway, when I started asking more specific questions like, what exactly do you mean by socializing daily? And what does that look like? To my surprise, most of them couldn't give a clear answer. After enough probing, many of them would just say something like, maybe a couple of times a week near other children on the playground is enough, which is radically different from what they say over and over. Your child should socialize with peers every day. And nobody was asking me what I was already doing before handing out such generalized advice. The professionals who actually helped us most were the ones who saw my son regularly over time, like our pediatrician with over 40 years of experience who had been tracking him since discharge, and his physiotherapist who had seen him twice a week for 2 or 3 years of his life. They understood him and knew him, and they had more understanding of our family and our situation. So their advice was calibrated to his actual situation, not a generalized norm. If I were doing this again, I would filter the advice much more aggressively. I would keep what comes from the people who actually examine my son regularly, therefore understand him well, and just let go of the rest without much guilt. Would it have been helpful anyway? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe dragging him around everywhere contributed to his remarkable cognitive ability, like knowing the map of our neighborhood by 10 months corrected and reminding me the to dos or the shopping list by 2 years corrected. Maybe all that exposure built something in his brain even while it was stressing him out. Or maybe the constant overexposure was exactly what kept his anxiety higher for longer. I really cannot say. Well, what I know for sure is it definitely helped my socialization with other moms and dads. It took 3 years for us to arrive at a little calmer and easier place. And there was so much learning, trying, and figuring out behind it. If I could do this again, I would slow down, Keep maybe one or two baby groups instead of three. Keep the library because he liked it, but skip the swimming class, which he spent 3 sessions just straight up crying and never once smiled in. I would accept what I could see in front of me in my child instead of pushing through everything, hoping it helps him grow out of prematurity faster. I would do some of these activities much later when he was more ready. And lastly, I would give myself credit much more often. You don't need someone else to validate how hard you are trying. You are with your baby every single day. You see things no professionals in a 30-minute appointment ever will. You are the advocate of your child and yourself. Trust what you see. Don't outsource that authority entirely to generalized advice that does not know your child. I was a first time mom who was trying very hard. I followed a lot of generic advice because I wanted to compensate for my son's prematurity. And if I'm being fully honest, because I was also looking for someone to tell me what I was doing was enough. That validation never came from outside, it had to come from me. I'm sharing this because I hope it saves you some of the pressure. Not all advice that meant to help actually helps when applied without context, especially for preemie parents whose children are literally on a different path. Filter the noise, trust what you see in your child, and give yourself more credit because you're doing much more than you think. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one. And this is Never Too Early.